In a daring social experiment, billionaire Elon Musk disguises himself as a homeless man to find out how a high-end bank in Beverly Hills treats someone who seems down on their luck. Before we dive into the shocking twist, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an incredible story like this. And while you're at it, drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. We love connecting with viewers from all over the world. The afternoon sun blazed over Beverly Hills, lighting up the palm-lined streets with a golden glow. In a city that thrives on glitz and glamour, where the rich flaunt their wealth without a second thought, luxury wasn't just a lifestyle, it was the norm. Among the rows of Bentleys and Lamborghinis parked along the spotless sidewalks, a man in worn-out clothes shuffled along, catching curious glances from passers-by. His scuffed shoes, frayed pants, and loose shirt told a story of hardship. Yet there was something about his confident stride, as if he refused to let the world's judgment affect him. That man was Elon Musk, one of the richest people alive, carefully disguised to blend in, not with Beverly Hills elite, but with the invisible and overlooked. He had gone to great lengths to perfect his look: a scruffy beard, a faded baseball cap pulled low, and clothes that seemed like they hadn't seen better days in years. His best disguise, however, was his ability to hide the commanding presence he normally carried. To anyone watching, he was just another nobody. As he approached First Summit Bank, its grand glass doors gleaming under the sunlight, his heart raced. He paused for a moment before stepping inside, curiosity and anticipation swirling within him. The bank's interior was almost overwhelming. Marble floors gleamed under the bright lights, and the high, ornate ceilings seemed to radiate wealth and exclusivity. Customers lounged in comfy leather chairs, sipping free coffee while sharply dressed bankers catered to their every need. The moment Musk stepped inside, the vibe in the room shifted. Conversations paused, heads turned, and a few people exchanged whispers. He could feel the weight of their judgment, the silent assumptions about his worth, or lack of it. But Musk stayed calm, his focus unwavering as he walked toward the reception desk. Behind the counter was a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a frosty expression. Her name tag read Marilyn. She barely hid her disdain as she sized him up. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cold and flat. "Yes," Musk replied evenly, keeping his voice steady despite the eyes drilling into his back. "I'd like to open a basic checking account." Marilyn blinked, momentarily surprised by his request. She quickly recovered, forcing a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Our minimum deposit for opening an account is $500, she said, speaking slowly as if explaining it to a child. "Do you have that with you today?" Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "I have this," he said simply. For a brief moment, Marilyn's professional mask slipped, showing a flicker of disdain. She let out a quiet, condescending laugh before regaining her composure. "I'm afraid that won't be enough," she said sharply. "Maybe you should try another bank, one that's better suited to your situation." The rejection hit hard, not so much because of the words, but because of how effortlessly they were delivered. Musk glanced around, catching the smirks and whispers from other staff and customers. For the first time, he felt a pang of vulnerability, a glimpse into the reality so many others endured daily, those without the privileges he usually took for granted. As Marilyn signaled a security guard, Musk noticed a young woman sitting at a nearby desk. She looked to be in her mid-20s, and unlike the others, her expression wasn't dismissive. Instead, her face showed a mix of curiosity and unease, as if she were wrestling with an internal conflict. Musk made a mental note of her before the guard's firm voice broke his thoughts. "Sir, if you don't have the required funds, I'll need to ask you to leave," the guard said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Musk nodded quietly, his mind racing. He had come here to test how people responded to appearances and circumstances, and while the reaction wasn't surprising, it was still disheartening. As he turned to leave, he cast one last glance at the young woman. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that fleeting exchange, he saw something different, something he couldn't quite place. Outside, the sun was still blazing, but Musk's thoughts were stormy. The world he had created and dominated seem far removed from the harsh realities faced by those without power or privilege. His experiment had just begun, and already it was revealing far more than he anticipated. Inside the opulent First Summit Bank, the atmosphere buzzed with a quiet arrogance. Staff members moved with the quiet arrogance. Staff members moved with the practiced efficiency of people who catered exclusively to the elite, their tailored suits and designer shoes, an extension of the bank's brand. Marilyn, the receptionist, had already dismissed Elon Musk once, but he lingered near the desk, undeterred. Clutching his crumpled $20 bill, he took a deep breath and stepped forward again. Clutching his crumpled $20 bill, he turned and stepped away. "I'd like to open a basic checking account," he repeated, his voice calm but firm. Musk's unassuming demeanor, coupled with his shabby appearance, seemed almost out of place against the backdrop of wealth and privilege. Marilyn looked up from her computer, her perfectly manicured nails clicking impatiently on the counter as she sighed. "As I mentioned before," she said, her tone clipped, "our minimum deposit is $500. We don't offer services below that amount." Her words were laced with the kind of subtle derision reserved for those deemed unworthy of her time. Musk reached into his pocket and produced the $20 bill again. He smoothed it out on the counter, the faded currency starkly contrasting with the gleaming surface beneath it. "This is all I have for now," he said evenly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "But it's enough to get started, isn't it?" Marilyn's lips curled into a tight smile, the type that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, we have policies," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be better off at a credit union or a community bank. First Summit caters to a different clientele." Around the room, heads turned subtly in Musk's direction. A few patrons exchanged amused glances, their whispers just loud enough to reach his ears. "The audacity," one muttered, while another chuckled under his breath. Despite the humiliation, Musk remained calm. He scanned the room, his eyes briefly locking on the young trainee he had noticed earlier. She was seated a few desks away, her head bent over some paperwork, but her frequent glances toward the reception desk didn't escape his notice. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't smug or dismissive. If anything, she looked uneasy. "Policies aside," Musk said, turning back to Marilyn, "isn't banking about helping people manage their money, no matter how much or how little they have?" Marilyn scoffed, leaning closer to lower her voice. "This is Beverly Hills, sir," she said, her tone cold. "We are not a charity." She pressed a button on her desk, summoning a security guard who quickly approached. "Sir," the guard began, his posture imposing, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not conducting business that meets the bank's policies." His voice was firm, but devoid of hostility, as though this were just another routine eviction. Musk hesitated, his grip tightening on the $20 bill. He had come here to test more than the bank's policies. He had come to test their humanity. But the walls of privilege were proving harder to penetrate than he'd expected. Reluctantly, he nodded and stepped away from the counter, but not before throwing one last glance toward the trainee. The young woman, whose name tag read Clara, seemed to wrestle with an internal conflict. Her colleagues carried on with their tasks, seemingly oblivious to the silent struggle playing out on her face. As Musk turned to leave, Clara's eyes met his. There was something in her gaze, an apology perhaps, a flicker of defiance. Outside, the sun was blinding, but Musk barely noticed. His mind raced, replaying the interaction over and over. The staff had treated him exactly as he'd anticipated, with scorn and dismissal. But Clara was different. She hadn't spoken a word, yet her expression had conveyed more empathy than anyone else in the building. Seated on a bench near the bank's entrance, Musk watched as customers came and went, their polished appearances a sharp contrast to his disheveled disguise. He thought of Clara again, wondering what kind of person she was, and whether she might be bold enough to defy the rigid culture of the institution she worked for. "Why did you come to our bank? There are plenty of places where you might have been treated better." Musk leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes the best way to see people's true colors is to strip away the expectations," he said cryptically. Clara frowned, confused by his words, but before she could press further, he stood up. "Thank you," he said, his tone warm, "for seeing me." Clara spent the night grappling with her decision. Her mind raced with the potential consequences of going against the bank's policies. Losing her job was a real possibility, but she couldn't shake the image of the man's calm, yet vulnerable demeanor. Something told her he wasn't who he seemed, and she resolved to act on her instincts. The following morning, Clara arrived at the bank with a renewed sense of purpose. She kept an eye on the front entrance, hoping the man would return. Her pulse quickened when she spotted him near the park bench across the street, seated with the same quiet composure as before. During her lunch break, Clara grabbed her bag and hurried outside, her heart pounding as she crossed the street. The man looked up as she approached, his piercing eyes meeting hers. "Back for round two?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Clara hesitated, then sat down beside him. "I wanted to apologize again for what happened," she began. "It wasn't fair, and I don't think you deserve to be treated like that." Musk tilted his head, studying her carefully. "Most people wouldn't give it a second thought," he said. "Why do you, Clara?" bit her lip, choosing her words carefully. "I joined the bank to help people," she explained, "but lately it feels like I'm just helping the people who already have everything. Yesterday reminded me why I wanted to be here in the first place." Musk nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "So what do you plan to do about it?" Clara took a deep breath. "I want to help you open an account," she said. "It might not be much, but it's a start." Back inside the bank, Clara approached her desk with a sense of determination. She logged into the system, glancing around nervously to ensure her actions wouldn't draw attention. Musk followed her inside, his demeanor quiet but observant. The other staff members barely acknowledged him, dismissing him as irrelevant. "Okay," Clara said, her voice low as she explained the process. "I can open a basic checking account for you. Normally we require a minimum deposit of $500, but I can waive that for now using my employee privileges." Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And you're willing to risk this for someone like me?" Clara nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. "Everyone deserves a chance. Besides, I don't think you're just someone like me. There's something different about you." He chuckled softly, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. "You don't even know me," he said. "No, I don't," Clara admitted, "but I can tell you're not what you seem." As Clara navigated the system, Marilyn's voice cut through the air. "Clara, who's that at your desk?" she called, her tone sharp. Clara froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Just helping a new client," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Marilyn's eyes narrowed as she approached. "A new client," she repeated, her gaze landing on Musk. "Haven't we already dealt with him?" "I'm handling it," Clara said firmly, meeting Marilyn's stare. Marilyn hesitated, clearly suspicious, but eventually shrugged and walked away. Clara exhaled, relieved but still on edge. She quickly completed the process, handing Musk a receipt for his new account. "There," she said, her voice triumphant. "You're officially a client." Musk looked at the receipt in his hand, then back at Clara. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly, "but you did." "It's the right thing to do," Clara replied simply. For a moment, Musk said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the desk. "Thank you, Clara," he said, standing to leave. "I'll see you again soon." Before Clara could respond, he walked out of the bank, leaving her staring after him. She unfolded the paper, her brow furrowing as she read the neatly written words, "Your actions today won't be forgotten." As she slipped the note into her pocket, she couldn't help but wonder what Musk's cryptic message meant. The risk she had taken felt monumental, but the look in his eyes as he left reassured her that she had made the right choice. Under notes to Clara, her small act of defiance had set something extraordinary in motion. Musk's quiet departure wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. The following morning, Clara arrived at the bank with a lingering sense of unease. Yesterday's bold decision still weighed on her mind. While no one had openly confronted her yet, she knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed the irregularities in the system. As a trainee, she was painfully aware of how precarious her position was. She couldn't shake the memory of the man's parting words. "Your actions today won't be forgotten." What did he mean? Was it a simple thank you? Or was there something more to his cryptic message? Clara felt certain that she hadn't seen the last of him. Oh, Clara felt certain that she hadn't seen the last of him. Blank expression. That afternoon, Clara was in the middle of helping a wealthy client when the bank's doors opened and the man from yesterday walked in. This time there was something different about him. Though he still wore his ragged clothes, he moved with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place against his appearance. Clara's heart skipped a beat when their eyes met, but she quickly masked her reaction. Marilyn, however, wasn't so restrained. The receptionist straightened up immediately, her face tightening with irritation. "Sir, we've already explained," Marilyn began, but Musk interrupted her, holding up a hand. "I'm not here to make trouble," he said calmly. "I'm here to make a deposit." Marilyn blinked, momentarily stunned. Clara, watching from her desk, felt a flicker of satisfaction. Musk stepped up to the counter and pulled a neatly folded stack of bills from his pocket. He slid it across the counter without a word. Marilyn, still flustered, began counting the money. $200, she muttered, her tone begrudging. She glanced at Clara's desk, where she had handled Musk's account the day before. "It seems your account is already set up, sir. I'll process this deposit." "Thank you," Musk said with a faint smile, his tone polite but firm. He turned and walked toward Clara, who was still seated at her desk, her pulse quickening. "You didn't expect me to come back so soon, did you?" Musk said as he approached her. Clara shook her head, unable to hide her surprise. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again," she admitted. He took a seat across from her desk, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I meant what I said yesterday," he told her. "Your kindness didn't go unnoticed. Most people wouldn't have done what you did." Clara flushed slightly, unsure how to respond. "I just did what I thought was right," she said. "And that's exactly why it matters," Musk replied. "You took a risk. You didn't know who I was or what I could do, but you acted on principle. That's rare." Clara hesitated, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. "Who are you?" "Really?" she asked. And, um, and, Musk's expression shifted, his eyes glinting with something that looked like amusement. Let's just say I'm someone who believes in testing the system," he said cryptically. Before Clara could press further, he stood up. "You've already done more for me than most people would, but if you're willing to take another chance, I'd like to ask for your help again." Clara frowned, intrigued but cautious. "What kind of help?" Musk leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Meet me at the park after your shift," he said. "There's something I'd like to show you." The rest of Clara's day passed in a blur. She found it difficult to concentrate on her work, her thoughts consumed by the enigmatic man and his unexpected return. What did he want to show her, and why did he choose her of all people? As the clock neared 5, Clara debated whether she should go. Meeting him outside of work felt risky, but her curiosity was too strong to ignore. By the time her shift ended, she had made up her mind. She left the bank and walked toward the park, the evening sun casting long shadows across the street. Musk was waiting for her, seated on the same bench where they had spoken before. This time he greeted her with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken plans. "Thanks for coming," he said, standing as she approached. "I'm not sure I should be here," Clara admitted, glancing around nervously. "You're not doing anything wrong," Musk assured her. "I just want to give you a glimpse of what happens when people like you make bold choices." Clara raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "What does that mean?" Musk gestured for her to follow him. "Walk with me," he said. "It's time you saw the bigger picture." As they strolled through the park, Clara couldn't help but feel that whatever came next would change everything she thought she knew, not just about him, but about herself. The park was quiet, the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird filling the silence between Clara and Musk as they walked. Her curiosity simmered beneath the surface, but she held her questions, waiting for him to speak. He seemed to be contemplating his words, his usual air of mystery now tinged with a sense of purpose. Finally, Musk broke the silence. "Clara, have you ever wondered why people are so quick to judge others based on appearances?" he asked, glancing at her. She nodded, thinking back to the sneers and whispers she'd witnessed at the bank. "All the time," she admitted. "It's something I've never been able to ignore, but I don't know how to change it." Musk stopped walking and turned to face her. Sometimes the only way to change a system is to challenge it directly, he said. That's why I went to your bank. I wanted to see how people react when they think someone has nothing to offer. Clara frowned, her confusion deepening. You're testing the system? She asked, trying to piece together his motives. Musk smiled faintly. In a way, he said, I've spent most of my life building systems, ones that shape industries, economies, even the way people think about the future. But the problem with systems is that they often forget the people they're meant to serve. Clara was struck by the weight of his words. So what are you trying to prove? I'm not here to prove anything, Musk said. I'm here to find people who still believe in doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. They continued walking until they reached a sleek black car, parked discreetly near the edge of the park. Musk gestured toward it. I want to show you something, he said, opening the passenger door for her. Clara hesitated, glancing back toward the bank in the distance. Her instincts told her to be cautious, but her curiosity won out. She climbed into the car, her heart pounding as Musk slid into the driver's seat. The ride was silent at first, the city's glittering lights streaking past the windows. Musk seemed focused, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. I've been in disguise for weeks, testing banks, businesses, and other institutions, he revealed. I wanted to see how they treated people who didn't fit the mold of wealth or success. Clara's eyes widened. That's ambitious, she said, struggling to process the scope of his experiment. It's necessary, Musk said. Too often these places focus on profit and appearances rather than people. But every once in a while, I meet someone like you, someone who sees beyond the surface. His words left Clara speechless. Before she could respond, the car pulled into an underground garage. Musk parked and led her into a nondescript elevator. As the doors slid shut, Clara's nerves heightened. When the elevator doors opened, they revealed a stunning, state-of-the-art office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while sleek desks and monitors lined the room. Clara stepped out cautiously, her eyes darting around the space. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This is one of my workspaces, Musk replied casually. A place where I plan ideas, build projects, and most importantly, gather people I trust. Clara turned to face him, her confusion giving way to awe. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Musk's expression softened. Because I think you're one of those people, he said simply. You didn't know who I was, yet you chose to do the right thing. That's rare, Clara, and I don't believe in letting rare qualities go to waste. Clara felt her cheeks flush. I don't understand, she said. What do you want from me? I want to offer you a job, Musk said, his tone matter-of-fact. Something far more meaningful than what you're doing now. I'm building a team of people who value integrity, innovation, and humanity. People like you. The weight of his words settled over her. Clara's mind raced with questions, but one thought stood out above the rest. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. What kind of job are we talking about? She asked cautiously. Musk smiled. One where you'll help change how institutions operate. You'll learn, grow, and contribute to something bigger than yourself. But it won't be easy. It requires courage, hard work, and a willingness to take risks. Clara hesitated, the magnitude of the offer sinking in. She thought of her life at the bank, how stifling and morally conflicted it often felt. This was her chance to break free and do something meaningful. Finally, she met his gaze and said, I'm in. Musk's smile widened, and he extended his hand. Welcome to the team, he said. As Clara shook his hand, she felt a surge of excitement and apprehension. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after Clara's life-changing conversation with Musk, she woke up with a sense of anticipation that she hadn't felt in years. The weight of her decision lingered, but it was buoyed by a new sense of purpose. As she prepared for her day at the bank, she couldn't help but wonder what Musk's next steps would be and how she fit into them. At the bank, things were business as usual. The same parade of wealthy clients flowed through the gleaming doors, greeted with plastic smiles and polished professionalism. Clara, however, found it difficult to concentrate. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Musk and the enigmatic opportunity he had offered. She was eager to learn more, but had no idea when or how he would contact her again. By mid-afternoon, Clara had almost convinced herself that Musk's visit had been a surreal dream. But as if on cue, the bank's glass door swung open and Musk walked in. This time his appearance was slightly more polished, still understated, but enough to blend into the affluent surroundings. All eyes turned toward him, and a hushed murmur rippled through the lobby. Clara felt her heart leap as he made his way toward her desk. "Good afternoon, Clara," Musk said with a warm smile as he took a seat across from her. Clara blinked, momentarily taken aback by the casual familiarity in his tone. "Good afternoon," she managed to reply. "I'd like to make another deposit," Musk said, pulling a crisp stack of bills from his jacket pocket. Something a bit more substantial this time. The murmur in the lobby grew louder. Marilyn, who was watching from her desk, frowned suspiciously. Clara quickly processed the deposit, her fingers trembling slightly as she entered the amount into the system. $10,000, she whispered, her eyes widening. Musk nodded, his expression calm. "Consider it a gesture of trust," he said. Clara handed him the receipt, her mind racing. What was he doing? The sudden deposit was sure to attract attention, and she wasn't sure how to explain it if anyone questioned her. As if on cue, Mr. Reynolds emerged from his office, his sharp eyes scanning the room. His gaze landed on Musk, and his expression shifted to one of confusion and suspicion. He walked over to Clara's desk, his tone brisk. "Is there a problem here?" Reynolds asked, glancing between Clara and Musk. "No problem at all," Musk said smoothly. "Just conducting some business." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "And you are?" Musk extended his hand. "A new client," he said with a hint of amusement, "one who appreciates the excellent service your trainee has provided." Reynolds hesitated, then shook Musk's hand reluctantly. "Well, we're glad to have you," he said, his tone less than genuine. "If there's anything I can do to assist, please let me know." Musk smiled. "Thank you, but Clara has been more than helpful." Reynolds lingered for a moment, clearly unsure of what to make of the situation, before returning to his office. Musk leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I needed to make a statement," he said quietly to Clara. Now everyone's paying attention. As soon as Musk left, Clara was summoned to Reynolds' office. She braced herself for the inevitable questions, her pulse quickening as she stepped inside. Reynolds was seated behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said curtly. Clara obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Who is that man?" Reynolds asked, his tone sharp. "He's a new client," Clara said carefully. "He came in last week and wanted to open an account. I helped him." Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "And why wasn't I informed of this?" Clara hesitated. "It was a small account at first," she explained. "I didn't think it needed to be escalated." Reynolds leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I don't like surprises, Clara. If this client turns out to be problematic, it will reflect poorly on you." Clara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I don't think he's problematic," she said. "In fact, I think he might be one of our most important clients." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "We'll see," he said dismissively. "For your sake, I hope you're right." That evening, Clara received a message on her phone from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, her heart pounding as she read the brief text. "You handled that well. Be ready. Things are about to get interesting." Clara stared at the message, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washing over her. Musk's cryptic words hinted at a larger plan, one she was now an undeniable part of. For the first time in her life, Clara felt as though she was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Whatever Musk had planned, she was ready to face it head-on. The next day began like any other at the bank. Clara arrived early, her mind still buzzing from Musk's cryptic text. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. As she organized her workspace, her colleagues chatted idly, unaware of the undercurrent of anticipation running through her. By mid-morning, the calm was disrupted. A sleek Tesla Model X rolled up to the curb outside the bank, its polished exterior catching the sunlight. Heads turned as the car door opened and Musk stepped out, this time dressed in a sharp suit that exuded authority. Inside, the staff exchanged confused glances as Musk entered the lobby, his presence commanding immediate attention. Gone was the man in ragged clothes. In his place stood a figure of unmistakable power and confidence. Clara's heart raced as she realized the moment of truth had arrived. Musk approached the reception desk, where Marilyn froze, her professional demeanor faltering. "Good morning," he said smoothly, his voice carrying an edge of amusement. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Moments later, Musk was ushered into Mr. Reynolds' office. Clara watched from her desk, her hands trembling slightly. She couldn't hear their conversation, but the tension was palpable. Reynolds' expression shifted from polite curiosity to stunned realization as Musk revealed his identity. "You're Elon Musk?" Reynolds stammered, his face pale. Musk nodded, his tone calm but firm. "I am, and I've spent the past few weeks visiting institutions like yours to see how they treat people who don't fit the typical mold of wealth and success." Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but Musk held up a hand to silence him. "What I saw here wasn't impressive," Musk continued. "Your staff's behavior, except for one person, was condescending and dismissive. That's not the kind of culture a financial institution should cultivate." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Musk, I assure you, this is an isolated incident. Our bank values all of its clients." Musk leaned forward, cutting him off. "Spare me the excuses," he said. "If not for Clara, I would have walked out of this bank and taken my business elsewhere. She's the reason I'm here now." Her actions showed integrity, compassion, and courage, qualities that are sorely lacking in your organization. The tension in the office reached a boiling point as Musk delivered his next statement. "I'm acquiring this bank," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reynolds' jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Musk said. "I've already initiated the paperwork. This institution will soon be under my control, and the first order of business will be a complete overhaul of its culture and policies." Reynolds struggled to compose himself. "Mr. Musk, I'm sure we can work together to address any concerns you have." Musk smiled faintly. "Your role in this organization will be reevaluated," he said. "But for now, I suggest you start preparing for some significant changes." When Musk exited the office, the entire staff turned to stare. He walked straight to Clara's desk, his expression warm but purposeful. "Clara," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "your actions last week didn't just change my perception of this bank. They reminded me why I started this experiment in the first place." Clara blinked, stunned. "Mr. Musk," she began, but he interrupted her. "Call me Elon," he said with a smile. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on her desk. "I'd like you to join my team. Full-time, effective immediately." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Clara stared at the card, her heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Musk replied simply. Clara looked around the room, her colleagues' faces a mixture of shock, envy, and disbelief. She thought of all the times she had doubted herself, the moments when she felt like her values didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. And yet here she was, being recognized for the very qualities she had been told to suppress. Dumb, dumb, dumb. She met Musk's gaze and nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. Musk extended his hand, and as Clara shook it, she felt a surge of confidence she hadn't experienced before. "This is just the beginning," Musk said quietly. As he left the bank, the staff erupted into murmurs, their eyes darting toward Clara as if seeing her for the first time. But she didn't care. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined, and for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. Clara's last day at the bank came and went in a whirlwind. The morning after her dramatic departure, she arrived at the address Musk had provided, a gleaming high-rise in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. The building radiated innovation, its sleek design a reflection of Musk's relentless pursuit of progress. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by a receptionist who ushered her into a private elevator. The ride up was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. When the doors opened, Clara found herself in a spacious, futuristic office. Walls of glass offered breathtaking views of the city, while the space buzzed with quiet efficiency. Musk appeared moments later, dressed casually but exuding his usual confidence. "Welcome to your new office, Clara," he said, gesturing around the room. "We're creating a model, a blueprint for how financial institutions can truly serve everyone." Their next step was ambitious, partnering with multiple small banks across the country to replicate the success of the first transformation. Clara was placed at the helm of the initiative, her confidence growing with each challenge. But as the scope of the project expanded, so did the resistance. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Larger banks and financial institutions, threatened by the shift in public perception, began pushing back. Representatives from these institutions dismissed Musk's initiative as idealistic and unsustainable. Clara found herself in meetings where her ideas were met with skepticism and outright hostility. One particularly heated discussion with a prominent banking executive left her feeling disheartened. "This isn't how the industry works," the man scoffed. "You can't rewrite the rules." Later that evening, Clara vented her frustrations to Musk. "They don't want to change," she said. "They're too comfortable with the way things are." Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Of course they don't," he said. "People resist change when it threatens their power. That's why we need to prove them wrong again." His words reignited Clara's resolve. She realized that the resistance wasn't a sign of failure. It was proof that they were making an impact. As Clara and her team moved forward, they began incorporating technology to make banking more accessible. Musk introduced her to developers and engineers who specialize in artificial intelligence and blockchain, explaining how these tools could revolutionize financial services. One evening, as Clara worked late in the office, Musk stopped by her desk. "How do you feel about this project?" he asked. Clara looked up, her expression thoughtful. "It's exciting, but it's also overwhelming," she admitted. "There's so much to learn, and the stakes feel so high." Musk smiled. "That's how you know it's worth doing," he said. "The most important work always feels impossible at first." Clara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She dove deeper into the technical aspects of the initiative, learning about innovations that could empower underserved communities, like mobile banking apps for rural areas and financial literacy programs integrated into digital platforms. Amid the whirlwind of work, Clara began reflecting on her own journey. She thought back to her days as a trainee at the bank, when she had felt powerless to challenge the status quo. Meeting Musk had been a turning point, but she realized that the qualities he valued in her, compassion, integrity, and courage, had been there all along. One evening, she sat down to write a personal statement for a presentation she was preparing. As she wrote, she found herself pouring out thoughts she had never fully articulated. Finance isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Every decision we make has the power to lift someone up or shut them out. We're creating a model, a blueprint for how financial institutions can truly serve everyone. Their next step was ambitious, partnering with multiple small banks across the country to replicate the success of the first transformation. Clara was placed at the helm of the initiative, her confidence growing with each challenge. But as the scope of the project expanded, so did the resistance. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Larger banks and financial institutions, threatened by the shift in public perception, began pushing back. Representatives from these institutions dismissed Musk's initiative as idealistic and unsustainable. Clara found herself in meetings where her ideas were met with skepticism and outright hostility. One particularly heated discussion with a prominent banking executive left her feeling disheartened. "This isn't how the industry works," the man scoffed. "You can't rewrite the rules." Later that evening, Clara vented her frustrations to Musk. "They don't want to change," she said. "They're too comfortable with the way things are." Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Of course they don't," he said. "People resist change when it threatens their power. That's why we need to prove them wrong again." His words reignited Clara's resolve. She realized that the resistance wasn't a sign of failure. It was proof that they were making an impact. As Clara and her team moved forward, they began incorporating technology to make banking more accessible. Musk introduced her to developers and engineers who specialize in artificial intelligence and blockchain, explaining how these tools could revolutionize financial services. One evening, as Clara worked late in the office, Musk stopped by her desk. "How do you feel about this project?" he asked. Clara looked up, her expression thoughtful. "It's exciting, but it's also overwhelming," she admitted. "There's so much to learn, and the stakes feel so high." Musk smiled. "That's how you know it's worth doing," he said. "The most important work always feels impossible at first." Clara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She dove deeper into the technical aspects of the initiative, learning about innovations that could empower underserved communities, like mobile banking apps for rural areas and financial literacy programs integrated into digital platforms. Amid the whirlwind of work, Clara began reflecting on her own journey. She thought back to her days as a trainee at the bank, when she had felt powerless to challenge the status quo. Meeting Musk had been a turning point, but she realized that the qualities he valued in her, compassion, integrity, and courage, had been there all along. One evening, she sat down to write a personal statement for a presentation she was preparing. As she wrote, she found herself pouring out thoughts she had never fully articulated. Finance isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Every decision we make has the power to lift someone up or shut them out. The institution, aptly named Equity First Bank, would be a living prototype for inclusive and innovative banking practices. Clara was tasked with overseeing the project, a role that both excited and terrified her. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure to succeed was immense. In a meeting with Musk, she voiced her concerns. "What if we fail?" she asked, her voice betraying her anxiety. Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Failure is always a possibility," he said, "but so is success. The question isn't whether we'll encounter obstacles, it's how we'll overcome them. And I believe in your ability to do just that." With his encouragement, Clara threw herself into the project. She assembled a diverse team of experts and worked tirelessly to bring the vision to life. From the architecture of the building to the technology used in daily operations, every detail was designed to reflect the values of accessibility, transparency, and human connection. When Equity First Bank finally opened its doors, the response was overwhelming. Customers from all walks of life flocked to the institution, drawn by its commitment to treating every individual with dignity and respect. The atmosphere inside the bank was unlike any other, welcoming, efficient, and inclusive. Clara stood in the lobby on opening day, watching as customers interacted with the staff and explored the new space. It was a surreal moment, the culmination of months of hard work and unwavering belief in a better way forward. Musk joined her, his expression one of quiet pride. "What do you think?" he asked. Clara smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "It's everything we dreamed of," she said. He nodded, "and it's only the beginning." The success of Equity First Bank set shockwaves through the financial industry. Other institutions began taking notice, some even reaching out to Clara and her team for guidance on implementing similar changes. What had once seemed impossible was now a tangible reality, proving that ethical banking wasn't just an ideal, it was a viable business model. Clara's journey had come full circle. From a trainee who felt powerless to challenge the system, she had become a leader who was transforming it. And while she knew there was still much work to be done, she felt confident in her ability to rise to the challenge. As she left the bank that evening, the city lights shimmering around her, Clara couldn't help but smile. The man in ragged clothes who had walked into her life months ago had set her on a path she never could have imagined. Now she was determined to use her platform to make a difference, not just for herself, but for everyone. The success of Equity First Bank rippled through the financial world like a seismic wave. Articles lauded it as a groundbreaking achievement, and interviews with Clara became a regular feature in industry journals. While the acclaim was gratifying, Clara knew this was only the beginning. The challenge now was to scale the model to reach more communities without losing its core values. Musk called a meeting with Clara and the leadership team to discuss their next steps. "We've proven the concept," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Now we need to expand, but we won't compromise the principles that made this work." Clara nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. The expansion wouldn't just be about opening new branches. It would involve training teams, adapting to regional needs, and ensuring every customer felt the same respect and care that had become Equity First Bank's hallmark. Clara threw herself into the expansion plans, starting by assembling a team of regional leaders who shared her vision. She looked for individuals with diverse backgrounds, people who understood the unique challenges faced by their communities. One such recruit was Marcus, a former community organizer who had spent years advocating for underserved neighborhoods. Clara was struck by his passion and pragmatic approach. "You don't just need systems," Marcus said during their interview. "You need trust. If people don't believe you're here for them, nothing else matters." Clara knew he was right. She brought Marcus on board, along with others who shared his insight and dedication. Together, they began laying the groundwork for Equity First Bank's next phase. Predictably, the expansion faced resistance. Established banks continued to undermine Clara's efforts, launching aggressive campaigns to discredit her model. One prominent financial analyst appeared on television, calling Equity First Bank a naive experiment doomed to fail. Clara felt a pang of frustration, but quickly reminded herself of Musk's philosophy. Resistance was a sign of progress. "They wouldn't fight us if they didn't feel threatened," Musk told her one evening after a particularly scathing article. "It means we're doing something right." Still, the pressure was immense. Clara often found herself working late into the night, poring over reports and strategizing ways to address the challenges ahead. Despite the exhaustion, she felt a sense of purpose that carried her through. The breakthrough came when Clara's team piloted a new initiative, a mobile banking unit designed to serve remote and rural communities. The sleek, solar-powered vans were equipped with cutting-edge technology, allowing customers to open accounts, apply for loans, and access financial education resources on the spot. The response was overwhelming. In one small town, an elderly farmer teared up as he thanked the team. "No one's ever brought a bank to us before," he said. "You're giving us a chance to catch up with the rest of the world." Stories like these reaffirmed Clara's commitment to the mission. The mobile units quickly became a symbol of Equity First Bank's dedication to accessibility and innovation. As Equity First Bank expanded, Clara's influence grew. She was invited to speak at international conferences where she shared her vision for a financial industry rooted in compassion and equity. Her talks were met with standing ovations, and other organizations began adopting elements of her approach. But Clara remained humble, often deflecting praise toward her team. "None of this would be possible without the people who believed in this vision," she said during one interview. "It's not about me. It's about creating a system that works for everyone." Her humility only endeared her further to those around her. Musk, ever the mentor, watched her rise with quiet pride. "You've become a leader," he told her during a rare moment of downtime. "And the best kind, the kind people want to follow, not because they have to, but because they believe in you." The expansion wasn't without its setbacks. In one region, a new branch faced unexpected delays due to local bureaucracy. A choice to prioritize people over profits, to build systems that include, rather than exclude. Her speech received a standing ovation, and afterward, several world leaders approached her with offers of support. Despite her growing influence, Clara remained humble, often reflecting on how far she had come. One evening, as she walked through the bustling streets of Nairobi, she thought back to her days as a trainee at the bank, when she had felt powerless to challenge the system. It was Musk's experiment, the man in ragged clothes, that had changed everything. His willingness to test the system had revealed her own capacity for courage and compassion. Now she was using those qualities to transform the lives of people around the world. Later that night, Clara called Musk to share her thoughts. "You saw something in me I didn't even see in myself," she said. "I didn't make you who you are," Musk replied. "I just gave you the opportunity to show it. The rest was all you." As Clara's work continued to expand, she began mentoring the next generation of leaders within Equity First Bank. She believed deeply in the importance of passing on the lessons she had learned and empowering others to carry the mission forward. During a training session with new recruits, Clara shared a piece of advice that had guided her from the beginning. Never underestimate the power of a single act of kindness. It might seem small, but it can change everything, for you and for the world. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring her team to embrace the values that had made Equity First Bank a success. By the end of the year, Equity First Bank had branches and programs in over 20 countries, each tailored to the unique needs of its communities. The movement Clara and Musk had started was no longer just an idea. It was a global force for change. One evening, as Clara stood on the balcony of a hotel in India, overlooking a vibrant city alive with possibility, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been challenging, but every step had been worth it. Musk joined her, his expression thoughtful. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "So have you," Clara replied with a smile. He shook his head. "This was always about you. You're the one who took the risks, made the sacrifices, and turned a vision into reality." As they stood together, looking out at a world that was slowly but surely changing for the better, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The mission wasn't complete, but she knew they were building something that would outlast them both, a legacy of hope, inclusion, and humanity. Years passed, and Equity First Bank became a cornerstone of global financial inclusion. The institution's mission had grown from transforming banking practices to empowering entire communities. Its branches were no longer just places to deposit money. They were hubs of opportunity where people could access education, resources, and tools to build better futures. Clara's role evolved as well. While she remained deeply involved in the organization, she began focusing on mentorship and advocacy. Her work inspired a new wave of leaders, each dedicated to carrying forward the principles that had made Equity First Bank a success. One evening, Clara stood on the stage of a packed auditorium at a global conference on financial innovation. Industry leaders, activists, and policymakers from every corner of the world had gathered to celebrate the impact of Equity First Bank. Musk, seated in the front row, smiled as Clara stepped up to the podium. Clara took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. "When this journey began," she said, her voice steady, "I was just a trainee in a bank, unsure of my place in the world. I never imagined that one small act of kindness would set me on a path to change my life and the lives of so many others." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What we've built isn't just a bank. It's a movement. It's proof that finance can be a force for good, that we can create systems that uplift rather than exclude." Clara's voice grew stronger as she continued. "But this movement isn't about one person or one organization. It's about all of us, the choices we make, the values we uphold, and the future we want to create. Together, we've shown that change is possible, and together we'll keep pushing for a world where opportunity is truly for everyone." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Musk stood as well, clapping with genuine pride. Later that evening, Clara and Musk shared a quiet moment backstage. The applause had faded, but the energy of the event still lingered. "You've created something extraordinary," Musk said, his voice filled with admiration. Clara smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. Musk shook his head. "I gave you an opportunity, but you turned it into something far greater than I ever imagined." "That's your legacy, Clara." Clara looked thoughtful. "It's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed in the vision, who worked to make it real." Musk nodded, his expression softening. "And it will live on long after we're gone." As Clara transitioned into a more advisory role, she began focusing on preparing her successors. She worked closely with a new generation of leaders, ensuring they understood the values at the heart of Equity First Bank. One of her mentees, a young woman named Amara, reminded Clara of herself in her early days. Idealistic, determined, and full of potential. During their last mentoring session, Clara gave Amara the same advice Musk had given her years ago. "Don't be afraid to challenge the system," she said. "The hardest battles are often the most important ones. And remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress." Amara nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I won't let you down," she said. Clara smiled. "You won't. I believe in you." On a quiet evening, Clara returned to the park bench where her journey had begun. The memory of Musk in his ragged clothes, sitting at the bank counter with $20, felt both distant and vivid. She thought of how much had changed since that day, how a single decision had set her on a path she never could have imagined. Musk joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, handing her a cup. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Finally, Clara spoke. Do you think we've done enough? Musk took a sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. Enough? No, he said. But we've done something, and that something has inspired countless others to do more. That's how change works. It's never about one person or one action. It's about the ripple effects. Clara nodded, feeling a sense of peace. She knew the work would never truly be finished, but she also knew they had made a difference. As Clara and Musk walked away from the bench, the sun set behind them, casting the city in a warm, golden light. Their journey had been filled with challenges, triumphs, and lessons that neither could have anticipated. But the true legacy of their work wasn't in the buildings they had constructed or the systems they had changed. It was in the lives they had touched, the opportunities they had created, and the hope they had inspired. Clara knew that the future was bright, not because the work was done, but because it had only just begun. As Elon Musk walked out of the bank that day, one thing became clear. Appearances still hold too much power in determining how people are treated. His experiment wasn't just about testing policies. It was about revealing the humanity, or lack of it, behind those policies. This story isn't just about Elon. It's about all of us. How often do we judge someone by their cover? How many times do we dismiss someone because they don't look the part? The real question is, how can we, as individuals, challenge these biases and create a world where everyone is treated with respect, no matter their circumstances? What would you have done if you were in Clara's shoes? Would you have stepped up or stayed silent? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. How do you think we can create more empathy and understanding in situations like this? If this story inspired you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories that make you think, feel, and reflect. Together we can spark meaningful change, one conversation at a time. See you in the next video.